live, the Domestic Estate Manager Studios in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. It's the nation's #1 podcast series in the private service industry. It's time for DEMA Live. Now, here are your hosts, Matt and Mike.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of DEMA Live. I am your host, Matthew Hack, and today's guest is the founder of CharlesMacPherson Associates, Mr. Charles MacPherson. Thanks for joining us today, Charles. How are you doing today?
It's great. I'm here in very cold, sunny Toronto.
Well, fantastic. So today we're going to be talking with Charles about a couple of separate topics. The first topic is going to be the use of the word domestic in the private service industry. And the second topic will be to have or not to have a title. That is the question. Before starting the discussion, though, I'm sure, Charles, our members would like to hear a little bit about you and your background. So to start it off, how did you get started in the private service industry?
Well, what's interesting is that, first of all, I graduated from hotel management school, but I fell into the industry, I think, the way a lot of people do, which is really by accident. And while I was working in the hospitality industry, I was in the catering business. A very good client of ours came to me and she said, "I know you're looking for a change in your life, Charles. Why don't you come and be my butler?" I was like, "Be your butler?" And she said, "Yes." And she said, "Don't worry, I will train you, on a weekly basis for the next year of all the things that you need to know about how to run a house properly. But I think that you've got the right attitude and the right skill set." And so I took the plunge. And so that's how I initially entered into private service.
Okay, great. And so from what you learned from the principal that you were working for, is that how you kind of got the feeling that the industry needed to have another school started? Is that why you started that, since you yourself were coming from the private professional field?
Well, I think that the things that I learned from my principal were really imperative in my success with that client for 7 years. But I think that in hindsight, I could have done a better job had I known more of the professional things that we teach in our academy. And so the reason we really put the school together is, to help everyone get a jump start with the amount of information that you need to learn, the type of systems, the right, understandings of how the household works with the employees, because it's very different. Although it's a business in itself, it's still very different from an office. And so I think that the school really helps you, get a really good basics so that you can move forward successfully.
Okay.
And quicker than if you're trying to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the big things that we see from a lot of our members that are just coming into the industry is, they want to know who they can come to kind of help introduce them to the industry. And I think that's why your academy offers such a fantastic opportunity for them.
Thank you. And we believe that. And our goal really ultimately is to help them not only be successful, to have a long-term resource with us, but really to be able to get into the industry as quick as possible and to understand how the industry works with the systems and techniques that we can help teach them.
Super. So anything any new things that are going on there at CMA that you might want to share with our members before we get started with our discussion?
Well, we're just really proud to announce that we did last week, and so I'm happy to share with you today that we announced our first 4-week program. And so you can now go to Butler and Household Management School and do the whole thing in 4 weeks. It's very intensive. You still learn the same amount that you would do over a 2-month period, but it's a smaller class, and you're in school 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. So it's very intensive, and you're off on Sunday, but you're still doing homework and getting yourself organized for the next week. But we've broken it down into 4 segments, so that week 1 is household management. Week 2 is all about, butlering and table service skills. Week 3 is household and laundry. And week 4 is kind of a cleanup of all the other things that you need to know that you wrap up into it. So it's really great to be able to either come for a particular class or to be able to come and get all your education done within a 1-month period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important because not all private service professionals can break away from their own their own job to get all the training at one time.
Absolutely. And so that's what we're excited about, is that we provide that opportunity for people to be able to come either for one day, 1 week, or 1 month.
Super, super. Well, that's fantastic news, and we're excited about that. Hey, there was one other thing that you might want to mention to everybody, and that's that you're going to be one of the general speakers at the 2012 DEMA convention.
Well, that's the rumor I hear. I don't know if there's any truth to it, but I hear that I'm supposed to be one of the speakers there, and so not only am I honored and proud, but I think it's going to be a great event because one of the things that I think is really important about DEMA is that working in this industry can be very lonely sometimes because you're isolated, away from your peers. You're in a household working for your principal with the staff, and so there's not a lot of ways to communicate with people. And so what I like about DEMA and what's really exciting about this conference in September is that it's a real way for everyone within the industry to be able to unite and realize that you're not the only one out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to have some really fantastic speakers. And you and I are going to, in a separate podcast today, we're going to discuss a little bit about the topic that you're going to be presenting on at the convention so that everyone can have a very good idea of what the convention is going to be able to provide each private service professional and vendor that attends the convention.
Exactly. And it's a great way, again, just to be able to realize that there's other people out there in the industry that have the same problems as you, and how do they deal with them, and just to be able to learn things together and unite.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead. Let's kick this thing off and get into high gear here regarding some professionalism topics that I think are always extremely important. And the more that we can do as an association to help our members become more educated on it, I think the better off it is. So the first topic that I wanted to personally discuss with you is the terminology. In the industry, there's never been a true definitive answer on utilizing the word domestic, domestic staff, domestic employee, and I think that it's kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. I know that here with DEMA and our philosophy, we try to call everyone a private service professional. However, I wanted to kind of get your opinion on the use of the word domestic in the industry and what your thoughts were.
I'm a real proponent and supporter of the word domestic, and I think that it's a healthy word. I think it's a good word, and I think it's a word that we should all be proud of, because the word domestic really describes that we're working within the domestic, so within a household. I think that quite often people interpret that as being either a slave or a servant or having to be subservient. But I think that it's a word that we should be proud of. It's a word that I use to describe myself, that I'm in the domestic industry, whether I'm, when I was a butler and a household manager, as a consultant where I help clients, and by having an academy where we teach butlering and household management skills, that falls all under the domestic industry. So I think that it's a word to be proud of. It's a word that we shouldn't be afraid of using, and it's a word that I think is important. And I think that when some people think that it belittles them, is that they don't understand what the meaning of the true meaning of the word is.
Okay, all right. I can definitely accept that terminology and philosophy. How about another word that seems to be coming under some scrutiny, and that's the word boss. How do you recommend to your students how they should refer to the person that they work for? I know that we here at DEMA refer to them as principals. What's your thought on that?
I think that for a private service professional to refer to the person who employs them as their boss is not only a lack of respect, but I think a real lack of understanding of the market in which they're working. And so I believe a private service professional should either refer to their employer, their principal, or the family. But to me, it's their employer or principal that I think that we should be using the most often. I think boss is something that I would expect, the housekeeper to say that the house manager is her boss. I expect that, and I'm comfortable with that. But I would be uncomfortable if a household manager or a private service professional was to be in front of their employer's friends and to say, "Oh yeah, this is my boss. I'm Charles. I'm the house manager here." I think that's not. It doesn't. It's not professional. I think in the way that it's presented and that it's said.
Okay. All right. Great. The most recent situation that we've had with a couple of different members, as a matter of fact, is to have a title or not to have a title. And I think that this is a fairly sticky situation because I think that a title does not incorporate what you actually do as a private service and as a private service professional, but it actually is more or less the duties that you do and perform for the principal that determine, who you are and what your value is to the family. But what's your thoughts regarding having a title, importance-wise to a private service professional, and then where and when to use your title, whether it be business cards, emails, signatures, and so on?
I think, first of all, everyone generally likes the title because it recognizes not only their ability, but more importantly, where you fit within the organizational structure. So if you say to someone that you're a general manager, you know that person has some type of importance within the organization. So I think that's why we generally all like to have some kind of title. A title also helps clarify who we are within the organization and what our responsibilities may be or may include. But at the end of the day, particularly when we have smaller households that may only have 4, 5, or 6 staff, I don't think a title ultimately is that important. I think more importantly is the job that you do. And I can think of corporations where certain people don't. They may have a job title that they use for a human resources perspective of where they fit and when they get their raises and their pay scale, but they don't use their title necessarily on a regular basis. So I think that at the end of the day, a title is important, but I think that there's also employers who don't necessarily want us to use our titles because they're trying to stay low key. And we need to be able to respect that. And we shouldn't be offended if we're asked not to use our title publicly. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that, in fact, if your employer appreciates you enough and wants you around and says everything's going really well, but we don't want you to use estate manager or, private service professional when you're in public, then, I think we need to respect their privacy because that's, ultimately we're there to protect their privacy.
Well, I think as one other person once told me, it's about keeping it professional, and the validation that you receive each week from your principal is whether or not you receive that paycheck at the end of the week.
I love that expression, and I know exactly who said that expression, and I'll leave it for them to be able to say it on one of your podcasts so they can get the credit for it. But if ever you're in doubt about whether or not you are appreciated by your employer or if you're doing a good job, it's really clear. Did you get your paycheck this week? And if the answer is yes, you got your paycheck this week, then that means your employer likes you and everything's fine. And I think that brings it back to this need that some people have to have a title. I think we need to let it go.
All right, great. Well, you heard it here first with Charles MacPherson and what the thoughts are that he has and teaches to his students as they come through his course. Charles, if someone's interested in finding out more about CMA and what you guys have to offer, can you go ahead and put that information out there for them on how they can get in contact with you, and also even if you have like a Facebook page that they can follow you on as well?
We do. So the Facebook page is the Charles MacPherson Academy for butlers and household managers. But let me make it really simple for you and just go on the internet to www.charlesmacpherson.com and you'll get straight to our website. And I think that'll be the easiest.
Fantastic. Well, Charles, I appreciate you being on the show today. We certainly look forward to having you back many times here in the future to discuss some other topics with you. And that's obviously, of course, if you'd be interested in doing so.
It's always a pleasure, and I'm proud to be here, and you may call on me anytime.
Great. Thank you very much, and we will talk to you again very soon. Well, that will do it for another edition of DEMA Live. Our special thanks goes out to this week's guest, Charles MacPherson of Charles MacPherson Associates. We hope that you've enjoyed the show and stay tuned for next week. Be sure to take a listen to the first installment of our Road to the 2012 DEMA Live podcast series as well. This special series of DEMA Live podcast will introduce not only this year's speakers, but also the topics that they will be covering. Early bird registration is currently open for the convention and can be done at www.demaconvention.com. Once again, that's www.demaconvention.com. Until next week, I've been your host, Matthew Hack. And remember, success in life, in anything, depends upon the number of persons that one can make himself or herself agreeable to.